Jake's first week at the academy was unlike anything he had expected. The classes moved at a pace that made him want to scream with frustration. In his quantum mechanics course, the Vorthak instructor spent an entire 3-hour session explaining a single equation. The alien students took careful notes and nodded seriously as if each word contained deep wisdom. Jake had understood the equation in the first 10 minutes. It was basically a variation of formulas he had learned in his second year at MIT. But, when he tried to ask about practical applications, the instructor looked at him like he had suggested flying to the nearest star by flapping his arms. "Young human," the instructor said slowly. "You must first understand the spiritual significance of each symbol before you can grasp its mathematical meaning. This equation represents the fundamental harmony between space and time. To rush past, its deeper truth is to learn nothing at all." The other students murmured agreement. Jake looked around the classroom and saw aliens who had been studying this same equation for months, maybe years. They were still taking notes on concepts that seemed basic to him. After class, Jake walked back to his dormitory with his head spinning. In the hallway, he ran into Lisa coming out of her xenobiology course. She looked just as frustrated as he felt. "How was your day?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. They spent 4 hours discussing the philosophical implications of cellular division. 4 hours, Jake. I kept wanting to show them electron microscope images and DNA analysis, but apparently that's considered too advanced for first-year students. Ryan joined them as they walked toward the commons area. The pilot looked tired. "My navigation instructor told me I need to spend 6 months learning to feel the cosmic currents before I can even look at a star chart." "Feel the cosmic currents, Jake. What does that even mean?" They found a table in the commons and sat down with their evening meal. The food was strange but edible, some kind of protein that tasted like chicken mixed with vegetables Jake couldn't identify. Around them, alien students ate slowly and spoke in quiet voices about their studies. "I don't get it," Jake said, keeping his voice low. "These people have had faster-than-light travel for thousands of years, but they act like every piece of technology is some kind of sacred mystery." Lisa nodded. "It's like they've forgotten that science is supposed to be about discovery and experimentation. Everything here is about following ancient traditions and memorizing old texts." Jake pulled out his tablet and showed them his assignment details. "Look at this micro-wormhole project. The specifications are incredibly detailed, but they're also incredibly inefficient. Some of these design requirements make no sense at all." Ryan looked over Jake's shoulder at the technical drawings. "Those power coupling systems are way more complicated than they need to be. Back home, we'd use a simple magnetic containment field instead of all these crystal matrices and energy channeling arrays." "Exactly," Jake said. "It's like they've made everything as complicated as possible just to make it take longer to learn." Over the next few days, Jake started to see patterns in how the academy worked. The Vorthak teaching method was based on rigid steps that couldn't be skipped or shortened. Students were expected to master each small piece before moving to the next, even if they already understood the bigger picture. Jake began spending his free time in the Great Library. The interface system was amazing once he figured out how to use it. Instead of reading books, he could connect his mind directly to the information networks and absorb knowledge at incredible speed. The alien students used this system for deep meditation on single concepts, but Jake found he could process entire subjects in hours. The library contained technical manuals, scientific theories, and engineering specifications from hundreds of civilizations. Jake discovered that many of the impossible problems the academy taught were actually quite solvable if you approached them from different angles. For example, the micro-wormhole generator that was supposed to take 15 years to design had a fundamental flaw in its power distribution system. The Vorthak approach used a complex network of energy crystals that had to be perfectly aligned and maintained. But Jake realized that a simple feedback loop using principles from Earth's quantum computing research could eliminate most of the complexity. He started making notes and sketches, working out improvements to the basic design. Instead of the traditional Vorthak crystal matrix, he could use a series of magnetic field generators that would be much more stable and efficient. The power requirements would drop by at least 60%, and the maintenance would be practically zero. Jake also noticed something else interesting. The alien students never seemed to make connections between different subjects. In his materials science class, they were studying molecular bonding structures that were identical to patterns he had seen in his quantum mechanics course. But when he mentioned this to a Vorthak student, the alien looked confused. "Those are different subjects," the student explained patiently. "Molecular bonding is taught in the chemistry division. Quantum mechanics is taught in the physics division. They are not related." Jake stared at him. "But they're the same mathematical relationships. The wave functions are identical." The Vorthak student just shook his head and walked away, apparently convinced that Jake was talking nonsense. This gave Jake an idea. What if the reason everything took so long to learn here was because the aliens never looked for connections between different fields of study? They treated each subject as completely separate, never realizing that understanding one could help with another. Jake started cross-referencing information from different disciplines. He found that energy manipulation, techniques from the advanced physics courses could be applied to the biological systems Lisa was studying. The spatial mathematics that Ryan needed for navigation were the same principles used in dimensional engineering. By the end of his second week, Jake had filled 3 notebooks with connections and patterns that apparently no one at the academy had ever noticed. Or if they had noticed, they had ignored them in favor of following traditional teaching methods. Jake decided to test his theory. He took the basic micro-wormhole design and started applying techniques from other disciplines. He used biological growth patterns to optimize the energy flow, navigation mathematics to improve the spatial calculations, and materials science to strengthen the containment field. The result was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of the massive, complicated device shown in the traditional plans, Jake's design was compact, efficient, and could be built with readily available materials. Most importantly, it would actually work better than the original. Jake built a small prototype using components from the Academy's engineering lab. The device was only about the size of a basketball, but it successfully created a stable micro-wormhole that lasted for over an hour. According to his calculations, the full-size version would be able to transport small objects across interstellar distances. He had solved the 15-year assignment in 2 weeks. Jake sat in his dormitory room looking at the prototype device, humming quietly on his desk. Tomorrow he would have to decide whether to show Professor Zethkar what he had accomplished. Part of him wanted to see the look on the professor's face when he demonstrated a working wormhole generator. But another, part of him wondered what would happen when the aliens realized that their entire educational system might be fundamentally flawed. Jake had a feeling that news like this could change things in ways he couldn't predict. Outside his window, he could see alien students in their slow, methodical study groups, spending hours on problems that could be solved in minutes with the right approach. Jake had always been told that patience was a virtue, but sometimes being impatient was exactly what the situation required. Jake made his decision. Tomorrow, he would show them what human learning could accomplish. Jake walked into Professor Zethkar's office carrying his prototype in a simple carrying case. The professor was reviewing student papers at his desk, moving with the same slow deliberation that seemed to characterize everything at the academy. "Ah, young Morrison," the professor said without looking up. "You are 3 weeks early for your first progress report, but I suppose humans are naturally impatient. Have you begun to understand the theoretical foundations of dimensional mechanics?" Jake set the case on the professor's desk. "Actually, Professor, I've finished the assignment." Zethkar finally looked up, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Finished reading the preliminary text, you mean? That is good progress for a human." "No, sir. I mean, I've completed the micro-wormhole generator project." The professor's head tilted. To one side, and what Jake had learned was a Vorthak expression of confusion. "That is not possible. The theoretical work alone requires years of study. You have been here less than 1 month." Jake opened the case and carefully lifted out his prototype. The device looked nothing like the traditional Vorthak designs the professor was familiar with. Instead of elaborate crystal matrices and ornate metalwork, Jake's generator was a smooth sphere about the size of a basketball, made from simple alloys and standard magnetic field projectors. "I'd like to demonstrate it if that's okay." "Professor, Zethkar stood up slowly, his tall frame unfolding like a piece of ancient machinery. Young human, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but what you have built cannot possibly be a functional wormhole generator. The complexity of such a device is beyond your comprehension. Jake connected his tablet to the device and ran through his startup sequence. The prototype hummed to life, its surface beginning to glow with a soft blue light. The traditional designs have a fundamental inefficiency in their power distribution systems. By using magnetic field generators instead of crystal matrices, we can achieve the same result with 70% less energy input. The professor moved closer, his academic robes rustling. Impossible. The crystal matrices are essential for proper energy channeling. Without them, the dimensional field cannot be stabilized. Jake touched a control on his tablet. A small point of absolute darkness appeared in the air above the device, no bigger than a marble. The magnetic fields create a more stable containment system. Watch this. He picked up a small metal stylus from the professor's desk and carefully pushed it toward the dark point. The stylus disappeared completely, not even leaving a flash of light. A moment later, it reappeared from a second dark point that had formed. Near the office window, Professor Zethkar stepped backward so quickly that he knocked over his chair. By the ancient codes, he whispered, that is a functional dimensional transport. How did you accomplish this? Jake shut down the device, and the dark points vanished. I noticed that the energy patterns in quantum mechanics are the same as the molecular bonding structures taught in material science. When I applied biological growth models to optimize the power flow, the whole system became much more efficient. The professor stared at the prototype device as if it might explode. You combined knowledge from different disciplines, but those subjects are taught separately for good reason. Mixing them leads to confusion and error. Actually, sir, I think mixing them leads to better solutions. Most of the problems I've seen here become much easier when you realize that the same physical laws apply across different fields of study. Professor Zethkar walked around his desk twice, his hands clasped behind his back. Jake could practically see the gears turning in the alien's mind as he tried to process what he had witnessed. You must understand, the professor said finally, that our teaching methods have been perfected over thousands of years. Each discipline requires complete mastery before a student can advance. This prevents dangerous mistakes and ensures proper understanding. Jake nodded respectfully. I understand that, Professor. But what if the slow pace is actually preventing students from seeing the bigger picture? My classmates spend so much time memorizing individual formulas that they never notice how those formulas relate to each other. The professor was quiet, for a long moment staring at Jake with all four eyes. Show me your calculations. Jake pulled out his notebooks and spread them across the professor's desk. Page after page of diagrams, equations, and cross-references between different subjects. He walked Professor Zethkar through his reasoning, explaining how he had identified patterns that connected seemingly unrelated areas of study. Here, Jacob said, pointing to a particularly complex diagram. This energy transformation equation from advanced physics is identical to the cellular growth pattern Dr. Campbell is studying in xenobiology. And this spatial relationship from navigation theory is the same mathematical principle used in dimensional engineering. Professor Zethkar studied the notebooks for nearly an hour, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification. Jake could see the alien's worldview beginning to shift as he realized the implications of what Jake had discovered. If what you suggest is correct, the professor said slowly, then our entire educational approach may be fundamentally flawed. We have been teaching students to master small pieces of knowledge without ever showing them how those pieces fit together. Maybe not flawed, Jake said diplomatically. Maybe just incomplete. Your system is really good at making sure students understand each concept thoroughly, but it might work better if students could also see the connections between concepts. The professor activated his communication device and spoke rapidly in the Vorthak language. Jake caught a few words that his translator rendered as emergency, council, and impossible breakthrough. Within an hour, Jake found himself standing in the Academy's main council chamber, facing 12 of the most distinguished academics in the galaxy. Representatives from the major species sat in a semicircle around a central platform, where Jake's prototype device hummed quietly. Chancellor Mordeth, the ancient Vorthak who led the academy, spoke first. Professor Zethkar reports that you have accomplished in weeks what our best students require decades to achieve. More disturbing, he suggests that you have done so by ignoring our proven teaching methods. Jake took a deep breath. With respect, Chancellor, I didn't ignore your methods. I just added something to them. Your approach is excellent for understanding individual concepts, but I found that looking for connections between different subjects made everything much easier to learn. A crystalline being from Andromeda chimed in with harmonious tones that Jake's translator converted to speech. Impossible. Knowledge domains are separate for good reason. Mixing disciplines leads to shallow understanding and dangerous errors. May I demonstrate? Jake asked. The council members exchanged glances and whispered consultations. Finally, Chancellor Mordeth nodded. Jake activated his device and created the same demonstration he had shown Professor Zethkar. The small wormhole appeared, and he transported objects from one side of the chamber to the other. But this time, he went further. The same principles that make this work, Jake explained as the demonstration continued, can be applied to faster-than-light communication, advanced medical treatments, and improved space propulsion. Once you see the underlying patterns, dozens of applications become obvious. A representative from the Silicon Collective, a species of living machines, spoke in electronic tones. Your device operates at 93% efficiency. Our best traditional generators achieve only 37% efficiency. How is this possible? Jake smiled. Because I didn't try to build a traditional generator. I built a human generator using human problem-solving methods. We don't spend years studying each piece separately. We look for patterns, make connections, and test ideas quickly. The council chamber fell silent, except for the quiet humming of Jake's device. Jake could see the alien academics struggling to process what they had witnessed. Their entire understanding of how learning worked was being challenged by a young human who had been at their academy for less than a month. Chancellor Mordeth finally spoke. Young human, what you have shown us today will require extensive discussion and analysis. In the meantime, I am suspending your regular classes. Instead, you will work directly with our senior faculty to document your methods. Jake nodded. Yes, sir. But I should mention that I'm not unique among humans. My friends Lisa and Ryan have been making similar breakthroughs in their fields. We all learn the same way. The Chancellor's eyes widened slightly. All humans learn. As you do? Pretty much. We're curious, we make connections, and we don't like waiting around when we could be making progress. Jake looked around the council chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. For thousands of years, they had built their society on slow, methodical progress and rigid adherence to traditional methods. Now they were facing the possibility that a young species from a backwater planet might have something to teach them about learning itself. The real revolution was just beginning. News of Jake's achievement spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within 3 days, representatives from major governments and corporations began arriving at the academy. Jake found himself at the center of attention he had never wanted and wasn't sure how to handle. The first visitors were from the Zentori Trade Federation. Ambassador Veltar, a distinguished Vorthak with silver markings on his forehead, met with Jake in one of the Academy's formal reception rooms. Mr. Morrison, the ambassador said, your breakthrough has created significant interest throughout our territory. We would like to offer you a position as Chief Innovation Officer for the entire Federation. The salary would be substantial, and you would have unlimited resources for research. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I appreciate the offer, Ambassador, but I'm still a student here. I came to learn, not to get a job. But surely you understand the implications of what you have accomplished. Our scientists estimate that your methods could advance our technology by centuries within just a few decades. Before Jake could respond, his communication device chimed with an urgent message. Lisa and Ryan had both made their own breakthroughs and needed to talk with him immediately. Jake excused himself from the meeting and hurried to find his friends. He found them in Lisa's laboratory, where she was showing Ryan something that looked like a small medical scanner. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa said excitedly. "Remember that plague that's been affecting the Rigelian colonies for 200 years? The one that their best doctors haven't been able to cure?" Jake nodded. The Rigelian plague was famous throughout the galaxy as one of the great unsolved medical mysteries. Entire research institutes had been dedicated to finding a cure. Lisa held up her scanner. "I solved it. It took me 4 days." 4 days? Jake stared at her. "Lisa, teams of alien doctors have been working on this for 2 centuries. That's exactly the problem," Lisa explained. "They've been treating it like a standard viral infection, but it's not. It's actually a symbiotic organism that's been misidentified. When I looked at it from a human perspective, using our understanding of parasitic relationships, the solution became obvious." She activated her scanner and showed Jake the readings. "See this? The Rigelians have been trying to kill the organism, but that just makes it stronger. Instead, you need to disrupt its communication network. It's like treating a bacterial infection with antibiotics, but this organism communicates through quantum entanglement." Ryan stepped forward with his own device, something that looked like a modified navigation computer. "And I've been working on space travel efficiency. You know how it takes most ships 3 weeks to travel between star systems in this sector?" "Yeah," Jake said. "I can do it in 8 days." Jake's jaw dropped. 8 days? How? Ryan grinned. "Turns out alien pilots are way too conservative. They follow predetermined routes that were mapped out thousands of years ago, but they never account for changes in stellar positions or gravitational fields. I've been using real-time navigation analysis like we do with Earth fighter jets." "But isn't that dangerous, Ma? Not if you know what you're doing. Human pilots are trained to make split-second decisions and adapt to changing conditions. These alien pilots spend hours calculating every course correction." Jake realized what was happening. It wasn't just him. All 3 humans were revolutionizing their respective fields using the same basic approach: pattern recognition, creative problem-solving, and willingness to challenge established methods. "We need to be careful," Jake said. "Word about my wormhole generator has already reached the major governments. If they find out about your breakthroughs too, things could get complicated." It was already too late. Jake's communication device chimed again with another urgent message. This time it was from Chancellor Mordeth, requesting an immediate meeting with all 3 humans. They arrived at the Chancellor's office to find it crowded with representatives from across the galaxy. Jake recognized some of them from news broadcasts: Admiral Kester from the Galactic Defense Force, Director Zolneth from the Advanced Technology Institute, and even a representative from the Mysterious Observers, being so advanced that they rarely communicated with younger species. Chancellor Mordeth gestured for the 3 humans to sit at a small table in the center of the room. "Please be seated. We have much to discuss." The Observer representative spoke first, its voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. "We have been monitoring your progress with great interest. In our experience, species typically require millions of years to develop the capabilities you have demonstrated in mere weeks." Admiral Kester leaned forward. "The military applications alone could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Faster ships, better weapons, more efficient defenses. Every government will want access to human techniques." Director Zolneth added, "Our preliminary analysis suggests that human learning methods could accelerate technological development across all fields by several orders of magnitude. The economic implications are staggering." Jake looked at his friends and saw the same concern in their eyes that he felt. They had come to the academy to learn, not to trigger a galactic revolution. "With respect," Jake said carefully, "we're just 3 people. We're not trying to change the galaxy. We're just doing what comes naturally to humans." The Observer's response sent chills down Jake's spine. "That is precisely what makes this so significant. If 3 humans can accomplish what you have accomplished, what might happen when your entire species becomes involved in galactic civilization?" Lisa spoke up. "What are you suggesting?" Chancellor Mordeth answered. "We are suggesting that humanity, Maybe the most important discovery in galactic history. Your species possesses capabilities that we have never encountered before. But we're not special, Ryan protested. We just learn differently than you do. Exactly, said Director Zolneth. Your learning methods, your problem-solving abilities, your willingness to challenge established knowledge, these traits could transform our entire civilization. Jake felt a growing sense of responsibility. What do you want from us? Admiral Kessitar stood up. We want you to help us understand how human minds work. We want to learn your methods and apply them to our own problems. And in return? Jake asked. The observer answered. In return, humanity would become a full partner in galactic civilization, no longer a junior species learning from their elders, but teachers in your own right. Jake exchanged glances with Lisa and Ryan. This was far beyond anything they had expected when they signed up for the exchange program. There's something else, Chancellor Mordeth said quietly. Word of your achievements has reached Earth. Your government is sending a full diplomatic mission to discuss expanded cooperation. Lisa's eyes widened. How expanded? The Galactic Council is prepared to offer humanity membership as a major civilization. Despite your relatively recent entry into interstellar travel, they want to establish human learning centers throughout the galaxy. Jake felt overwhelmed. Learning centers? Places where humans could teach other species your methods of rapid learning and innovation. Think of it as repaying the galaxy for all the knowledge you gain here, but in a way that only humans can provide. The room fell silent as the three humans absorbed the implications. They had come to the academy as students, but they were being asked to become teachers to an entire galaxy. Ryan was the first to speak. What happens to the traditional ways of learning? Are you saying the old methods are wrong? Chancellor Mordeth shook his head. Not wrong, but incomplete. Your methods could complement our approaches, creating something better than either system alone. Jake realized they were at a turning point not just for themselves, but for the relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. The choice they made here would affect billions of beings across thousands of worlds. We need time to think about this, Jake said finally. The observer's voice carried a note of approval. Wisdom. But remember, young humans, that the galaxy is watching. Your species has already changed everything simply by being yourselves. The question now is how you choose to use that change. As the meeting ended and the various representatives filed out, Jake looked at his friends and realized that their simple educational exchange had become something much larger. They weren't just students anymore. They were ambassadors for a new way of thinking that could reshape galactic civilization itself. 6 months later, Jake stood in front of a classroom unlike any in the Academy's history. Instead of the traditional rows of alien students sitting quietly for hours, the room buzzed with activity. Vorthak students worked alongside crystalline beings from Andromeda, while Silicon Collective members shared data with organic species Jake had never seen before. The class was called Human Methods of Learning, and it was the most popular course ever offered at the Academy. Students who had spent decades on single problems were now solving complex challenges in weeks. Remember, Jake told his students, the goal isn't to memorize every formula. The goal is to understand the patterns that connect different ideas together. Crixtel, the Silurian student Jake had first noticed during orientation, raised one of his forearms. Professor Morrison, I have been working on energy manipulation for 30 years. Using your methods, I solved 3 new applications just this morning. How is this possible? Jake smiled. Because you stopped treating energy manipulation as separate from everything else you know. When you connected it to spatial mathematics and biological systems, you could see possibilities that weren't visible before. The transformation hadn't been easy. When Jake, Lisa, and Ryan had agreed to become instructors, many alien faculty members had resisted. Some traditionalists argued that human methods were dangerous shortcuts that would lead to shallow understanding and catastrophic mistakes. But the results spoke for themselves. Students using human learning techniques were making breakthrough discoveries at an unprecedented rate. More importantly, they were making fewer mistakes, not more. By understanding the connections between different fields, they could spot potential problems that the old methods missed entirely. Professor Zethkar entered the classroom carrying a datapad filled with reports. Jake had convinced the academy to make the former dean his teaching partner, and the arrangement had worked better than either of them expected. "Students," Professor Zethkar announced, "I have updates from around the galaxy regarding projects initiated using human learning methods." The classroom fell quiet as students listened eagerly. These updates had become a regular feature of the class, showing how the techniques they were learning were being applied across known space. The Rigelian colonies report that Dr. Campbell's plague cure has been completely successful. All affected populations have recovered, and the treatment is now being distributed to other species with similar symbiotic infections. Lisa, who was teaching her own xenobiology course in the next building, had become famous throughout the galaxy for her medical breakthroughs. Her approach of studying diseases as complete ecosystems rather than isolated problems had revolutionized alien medicine. "Commander, Torres's navigation improvements have been adopted by the major shipping lines," Professor Zethkar continued. "Travel times between core worlds have been reduced by an average of 60%, with no increase in accidents." Ryan had established a pilot training program that was transforming space travel. Instead of following ancient, predetermined routes, new pilots learned to adapt in real time to changing conditions. The results were faster, safer, and more efficient travel throughout the galaxy. Most significantly, the professor said, the Human Galactic Innovation Institute has announced its first major project success. Jake perked up. The institute had been his idea, a place where humans and aliens could work together on problems that had stumped galactic civilization for centuries. The first project had been ambitious, developing a universal communication system that could translate between any species instantly. "The Universal Translator project is complete," Professor Zethkar announced. "Teams using human pattern recognition combined with alien computational power have created a device that can facilitate real-time communication between any known species." The students erupted in excited chatter. Jake had to admit he was impressed, too. The translation problem had been considered impossible because of the vast differences in how various species processed information. But by treating communication as a pattern-matching challenge rather than a purely linguistic one, the mixed teams had found a solution. Velnath, the crystalline being who had been one of Jake's first converts to human methods, chimed in harmonious tones. "Professor Morrison, may I ask about resistance to these changes? Not all species have embraced human learning techniques." Jake nodded. "That's true, and it's understandable. Some civilizations have built their entire cultures around traditional learning methods. Change is scary, especially when it challenges fundamental beliefs about how knowledge should be acquired." "But the results prove the effectiveness," protested a student from the mechanical collective. "Results aren't always enough," Jake replied. "Some species value the journey of learning as much as the destination. They believe that spending years mastering each concept builds character and wisdom that can't be gained through rapid learning." Professor Zethkar added, "This is why the Academy now offers both traditional and human-style courses. Students can choose the approach that best fits their learning style and cultural values." Jake looked around the classroom at his diverse group of students. When he had first arrived at the Academy, these beings had seemed impossibly alien. Now he could see past their different physical forms to recognize the universal curiosity and desire to learn that connected all intelligent species. "There's something I want to tell you," Jake said to the class. 6 months ago, I thought I was coming here to learn from you. I thought humans were the primitive newcomers who needed to catch up to galactic civilization." The students listened intently as Jake continued. "But I've realized that learning isn't about who's more advanced or who's been around longer. It's about sharing different perspectives and finding better ways to understand the universe together." A young Vorthak student who had joined the class just weeks earlier raised her hand. "Professor, will human methods completely replace traditional learning?" Jake shook his head. "I don't think so, and I don't think they should. Traditional methods are excellent for building deep understanding and preventing mistakes. Human methods are good for making connections and solving problems quickly. The best approach probably combines both. As the class ended and students filed out, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction he had never experienced before. Teaching was different from learning, but it was just as rewarding. Every time a student made a breakthrough or solved a problem in a new way, Jake felt like he was contributing to something larger than himself. Professor Zethkar approached Jake's desk as the last student left. "I have news from Earth," he said, holding up his communication device. "The first group of human children will arrive next month to begin studies at our partner academies throughout the galaxy." Jake smiled. "Not as students this time, I assume?" "No," the professor replied. "As junior instructors. It seems that human children are even better at pattern recognition and creative problem-solving than human adults." Jake laughed. "Of course they are. Kids haven't learned yet that some things are supposed to be impossible." As Jake packed up his teaching materials, he thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. Humanity had gone from being an unknown species on the edge of galactic civilization to being teachers and partners with some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. But the most important change was in how everyone thought about learning itself. The old approach of slow, methodical study still had its place, but now it was balanced with human creativity, pattern recognition, and willingness to challenge established ideas. Jake had come to the academy to master what took years. Instead, he had taught the galaxy that the real mastery was in never stopping the search for better ways to learn and grow. And sometimes, the best discoveries happened not in years or months, but in the time it took to finish lunch and ask a simple question: what if we tried it differently? The revolution in galactic education was just beginning, and Jake Morrison, the human who mastered what took years by lunchtime, was proud to be part of it. The transport ship came out of jump space with a soft hum that made Jake Morrison's stomach turn. He pressed his face against the small window and watched the biggest space station he had ever seen grow larger in front of them. The Centauri Galactic Academy looked like a small moon made of crystal and metal. Thousands of ships moved around it like tiny insects. "Holy cow," said Ryan Torres from the seat next to him. The pilot had seen plenty of space stations, but nothing like this. "That thing must be 50 miles across." Dr. Lisa Campbell looked up from her datapad where she had been reading about alien biology for the past 3 hours. 57.8. 3 miles, actually. It houses over 2 million students and teachers from 400 different worlds. Jake whistled low. Back on Earth, the biggest university had maybe 40,000 students. This place was like a floating city built just for learning. He watched alien ships he had never seen before dock at ports that stretched for miles. Some ships looked like they were made of living coral. Others seemed to be pure energy held in place by force fields. The docking took another hour. Jake spent the time watching the other passengers get ready to leave. Most of them were aliens he had only seen in pictures before. There was a group of tall, thin beings with blue skin and 4 arms. Their heads were twice as long as human heads and covered in what looked like scales. Jake knew from his briefing files that they were Vorthak, the species that ran the academy. Near the back of the transport sat something that looked like a walking crystal formation. It was about 8 feet tall and seemed to glow with its own light. Every few minutes it would make a sound like wind chimes. That had to be one of the beings from the Andromeda Galaxy. Jake had read that they communicated through harmonic frequencies instead of spoken words. When the docking was finally complete, Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the crowd toward the exit. Earth had sent only 3 humans to the academy as part of the first exchange program. Jake was there to study engineering and technology. Lisa would focus on alien biology and medicine. Ryan was supposed to learn about advanced spaceflight and navigation. The station's gravity felt exactly like Earth normal, which surprised Jake. He had expected to feel lighter or heavier. The air even smelled okay, though there was a strange metallic taste to it. The walls around them were made of some kind of white material that seemed to glow softly from the inside. A tall Vorthak, wearing what looked like academic robes, waited for them at the customs checkpoint. His skin was darker blue than the others Jake had seen, and he had more elaborate markings on his forehead. When he spoke, his voice was deep and had an odd echo to it. Welcome to the Centauri Galactic Academy. I am Professor Zethkar, Dean of Advanced Sciences. You are the humans, yes? Jake stepped forward. Yes, sir. I'm Jake Morrison. This is Dr. Lisa Campbell and Ryan Torres. The professor looked them up and down like he was examining something strange. Humans, such short lifespans, such primitive technology. I wonder what you hope to accomplish here. Lisa spoke up before Jake could respond. We're here to learn, Professor. Earth may be new to galactic civilization, but we're eager to understand how things work out here. Professor Zethkar made a sound that might have been laughter. Learn? Yes. But understand that what we teach here requires decades of study. Our Vorthak students spend their first 20 years just learning basic concepts. Other species take even longer. Your human brains process information so quickly that you miss the deeper meanings. Jake felt his jaw tighten. The professor was being polite, but Jake could hear the condescension in his voice. It reminded him of his early days at MIT when some professors had treated students from smaller schools like they were mentally slow. They followed Professor Zethkar through corridors that seemed to stretch for miles. Other students moved past them in groups. Jake saw beings that looked like walking plants, others that seemed to be made of living metal, and some that were just floating spheres of light. None of them paid much attention to the three humans. Your dormitory assignments, said the professor, handing them each a small device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a crystal. These will also serve as your translators, library access, and communication devices. Classes begin tomorrow at the 7th hour. Jake looked at his device. The symbols on it shifted and changed until they became English text. His room was in Section 12, Level 45. Ryan and Lisa were in the same section but on different levels. Professor, Jake said, what will I be studying exactly? Zethkar stopped walking and turned to face him. You indicated interest in advanced engineering, yes? Very well. You will begin with basic quantum dimensional mechanics. It is introductory level, suitable for beginners. How long does it usually take students to complete the course? For most species, 15 to 20 standard years. Vorthak students with our superior mental discipline can sometimes finish in 12 years. Of course, that is just the introductory level. Jake blinked. 15 years? For an intro course? The universe is complex, young human. True understanding cannot be rushed. You will learn this, or you will fail and return home. They continued walking until they reached a large central area that looked like a plaza. The ceiling was transparent, showing the star field outside. Hundreds of students sat at tables or walked between buildings that rose up around the plaza like towers. This is the academic commons, explained the professor. Here you will find other students, study groups, and the entrance to the great library. The library contains the collected knowledge of our civilization spanning 50,000 years. Lisa was staring at a group of students who looked like they were made of pure energy. How do they read physical books? They do not. The library interfaces directly with consciousness. Knowledge flows from the archives into the mind through meditation and mental discipline. Some advanced students spend years in deep study with a single text. Jake watched a group of the tall, scaled aliens working at what looked like a mathematics problem. They moved slowly and deliberately, writing symbols in the air with their fingers. The symbols hung there, glowing until one of them would nod and the symbols would rearrange themselves. How long have they been working on that problem? Jake asked. Professor Zethkar glanced over. Ah, yes, third-year students working on basic energy transformation equations. They began this problem set approximately 6 months ago. With luck, they will complete it before the year ends. 6 months for one problem set. Jake had knocked out entire physics courses in a semester back on Earth. Either these aliens were incredibly thorough or they were incredibly slow, maybe both. Tomorrow you will receive your first assignment, the professor continued. Design and build a stable micro-wormhole generator. The theoretical framework alone typically requires 5 years of study. Construction and testing take another 10 years minimum. Jake nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. A micro-wormhole generator sounded complicated, but 15 years seemed excessive. Back home, NASA had built their first experimental wormhole probe in 3 years, and that was starting from scratch. As they walked toward the dormitories, Jake noticed something else. The alien students all moved with the same slow, careful pace. They spoke in measured tones and seemed to think for long moments before responding to questions. Everything here was deliberate and methodical. Jake was used to working fast. In engineering school, he had learned to trust his instincts and make quick decisions. His professors had always said his best quality was the ability to see patterns and make connections that others missed. Here that might be seen as being sloppy or careless. They reached the dormitory section and Professor Zethkar left them with directions to find their rooms. Jake found his quarters on level 45 and was surprised by how comfortable they were. The room was larger than his apartment back on Earth, with a bed, desk, and what looked like an advanced computer terminal. He sat down at the desk and activated the device the professor had given him. Information about the academy appeared on the screen, along with his class schedule and assignment details. The micro-wormhole generator project filled several screens with technical specifications and safety requirements. Jake read through the requirements twice. The project was complex but not impossible. The physics involved were advanced, but he had studied similar concepts in graduate school. The real challenge would be adapting human engineering approaches to alien technology and materials. Outside his window, he could see other students in the buildings across the plaza. Most of them were sitting motionless, apparently deep in meditation or study. A few groups were engaged in what looked like slow, ritual discussions. Jake pulled out his laptop and started making notes. If these aliens wanted to spend 15 years on an intro project, that was their choice. But Jake Morrison had never been one to do things the slow way. He had a micro-wormhole generator to build, and he planned to have it working long before lunchtime.